Hi everyone. I think we're all here.
Hey, Alex.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yep. Am I audible?
Yes, perfectly. Okay, guys. So we'd like to welcome you to the first of a series of spaces we're doing on chain abstraction. I'm Alex, the social media manager at Etherspot. So a bit of introduction on Etherspot. We're an account abstraction infrastructure provider, designer to empower developers to create a seamless user experience for their dApps or blockchain protocols on EVM compatible chains. Our journey began with the development of the Pillar wallet in 2017, one of the first EVM wallets. Early on, we identified usability challenges with EOAs, which led us to introduce smart accounts. So this brought advanced capabilities and open doors to innovative use cases, even before EVM L1s and L2s were widely available. So, at that point, we separated the Smart Account SDK from the Pillar wallet under the Etherspot brand, allowing other wallets and apps to leverage this feature. So since then, we've developed numerous solutions, such as an Account Abstraction SDK designed to deliver a seamless Web3 user experience, a Scanda bundler to batch multiple transactions into one, the Arca Paymaster, which provides sponsored and gasless transactions, and recently a modular ERC 7579 SDK, which allows the creation of customizable accounts by integrating various models, allowing developers to enhance security and user experience by integrating various modules. So, if you know us, we've done extensive work in the account abstraction space and collaborated with numerous teams. As an example, we were working closely with the Ethereum Foundation and, well, as long as other teams, on a shared mempool initiative that has been launched on the mainnet recently. We've posted about that just the past week. Since today's call is a beginner-friendly one, I won't get into the details, but the main function of a shared mempool is to allow user ops received by one bundler to be distributed to all its connected peers and maintain the open, decentralized nature of blockchain technology. Today, we're also developing our own chain abstraction solution, and we thought starting this space series would be a great way to inform both users and developers. If you have any questions, make sure to add them to the comment section so that we can address them at the end. So, chain abstraction. So this has been a hot topic of discussion over the last couple of months, with many viewing it as the final frontier or perhaps the missing puzzle piece that will ultimately enable the onboarding of the next billion users to Web3. So, this is something we've been striving towards for years, right? We've talked about that numerous times. But what exactly is chain abstraction? Is it a technology or is it more of an approach? How does it differ from account abstraction? What pain points does it solve? And what benefits does it bring to users and developers? What's the core tech driving it? These are just some of the questions we'll cover today. So make sure to stay tuned until the end. Now, picture this. So you want to spend 200 USDT on Arbitrum, let's say. The problem is you only have 100 USDT on Arbitrum, but you also have 50 USDT on Polygon and 50 USDT on Ethereum. What do you need to do? So first, you need to bridge 50 USDT from Polygon to Arbitrum, right? Then you bridge another 50 USDT from Ethereum to Arbitrum. Sounds straightforward, sure. Well, it's easier said than done. I mean, not that it's overly complicated, at least not for somewhat experienced users, but it's time consuming and straight up boring. Let's put it this way. And we haven't even touched on the gas fees in native tokens or the numerous signatures involved, which are significant barriers for new users. These, by the way, are challenges we've been also addressing at Etherspot through account abstraction. Okay, but let's stick to the scenario. So you bridge 50 USDT from Polygon, another 50 USDT from Ethereum, and finally you're ready to spend 200 USDT on Arbitrum. Not too bad, right? Right, yeah. So now imagine trying to explain this to your uncle who's been asking you about blockchain. Does it sound like he would rush to set up a wallet? Probably not, right? This is where chain abstraction, or CHA as it's often abbreviated, comes into play. It's an approach designed to make blockchain interactions easier and more intuitive by simplifying the complex processes involved in cross-chain activity. Right now, we live in a world with multiple blockchain networks, each with its own protocols, security mechanisms, and token ecosystems. This diversity, while certainly powerful, creates a fragmented experience for users and developers alike. The constant need to switch networks, bridge tokens, and manage wallets across various chains is bothersome, to say the least. Let's be real, like the scenario I described earlier is neither practical nor appealing to the everyday user. So chain abstraction addresses these issues by creating sort of a unified layer that abstracts away the differences between chains. While it's more of an approach than a specific technology, you can think of it as a universal interface that handles all the behind the scene complexities of blockchain, so users don't have to. With chain abstraction, users interact with dApps seamlessly as if all blockchains were one. Meanwhile, the backend manages the logistics, so bridging assets, executing transactions, and handling cross-chain data in general. It essentially abstracts the chain layer from the user experience, enabling users to focus on actions and intents, remember this word, rather than infrastructure. So this isn't just a theoretical concept, it's the foundation of a more accessible Web3. By abstracting chain-specific requirements, chain abstraction dramatically improves both user and developer experiences. It makes it easier to build and use dApps that operate across multiple networks without additional steps or headaches. In essence, it is about bridging the gaps between blockchain networks to deliver a simpler, more integrated experience. It's about paving the way for mainstream adoption, making blockchain accessible not just to your crypto-savvy friends, but also your uncle, your coworker, or even your neighbor. So with that introduction, let's dive into today's session. Remember, if you have any questions, make sure to add them to the comment section. We'll be answering those towards the end of the space. But before we get to the next questions, I would like to welcome our invited speaker for today, Anirudh. Hi, Ani. Can we start with a quick introduction from you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was a great introduction to chain abstraction and what we are covering today. Yeah, that was a great introduction, Alex. Thank you so much. So I think probably, I can sort of give a very quick overview in terms of what is account abstraction, the kind of role that account abstraction plays within chain abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
And also maybe
Yeah, go ahead.
The kind of sort of role that account abstraction plays within chain abstraction, and sort of taking it forward, maybe I can even break down the kind of differences in outcomes that both account abstraction and chain abstraction would be enabling for end users and also folks who are building on top of account abstraction or leveraging smart wallets in general, right? So I think the first place for us to start all of this is with respect to when Web3 started getting more and more popular. We had a bunch of different issues, mainly at a wallet level, on network level, with various gas fees associated with it. And again, there is a big issue with, especially right now, with the high amount of fragmentation that accompanies the EVM ecosystem. You have L1s, L2s, L3s, all of these which are usually optimizing for one part of the blockchain trinity or the other, which is security, scalability, and speed, right? So with all of these different mini ecosystems that are getting formed, I think one of the biggest issues has been A, how do we simplify the user experience? B, how is it that we can make things more interoperable, right? And essentially, that's where I think the crux of the difference between AA and chain abstraction lies. Account abstraction was heavily focused on how is it that we can simplify the user experience of the user, right? While chain abstraction takes that a step further. Like, for example, right now, even Etherspot is looking at how is it that we can venture into the chain abstraction space. And we are, in fact, leveraging the simplicity and ease of use that is brought about by smart wallets, which are a very core element of account abstraction infrastructure, the paymasters and bundlers, which bring in ease of use on different blockchains and also a lot more censorship resistant and decentralized approach to how transactions the user ops themselves are submitted on chain. Leveraging all of this, I think chain abstraction starts to solve for how is it that these different ecosystems and mini ecosystems can work together and enable end outcomes for users. So the earlier example that you had mentioned in terms of transfer of funds from chain A to chain B, it becomes so much more easier. The reason for that, I can maybe if I dig a little bit deeper into it, is even right now, if you look at any of the account abstraction players in the market, we have the core AA infrastructure that we build, which consists of smart wallets, bundlers, paymasters, and more. But we also work with various third-party entities like DEXs and bridges to enable cross-chain transfer of liquidity. And while this is great, and this was step one in making sure that we are able to ease cross-chain operations, it's not the complete solution. And I think chain abstraction is basically the natural sort of evolution and one of the most strongest use cases of account abstraction out there.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect. Yeah, I think it's really important to get that out, like the main differentiation between chain abstraction and account abstraction, and these two terms are obviously connected, and sometimes it's something that creates some confusion. So it's great to hear that one is actually part of the other. They complement each other. So although I touched on it briefly, I wanted to ask you, like, why do users find these cross-chain interactions so challenging? And how does chain abstraction aim to solve these cross-chain interaction issues?
Sure. So I think we can break down, the kind of challenges users face into sort of multiple buckets. I think the first one is, as we just touched upon it, it is the fragmentation of blockchains. Right? Now, every blockchain usually has its own set of protocols. It has its own different standards, own different, it has a set of wallets that it probably is working very closely with. And there's a bunch of different types of assets that they usually focus on sort of promoting within their particular blockchain or the blockchain ecosystem as such. The second bucket, I would say, is when these platforms, especially a lot of the projects that get built and some of the more major projects within each of these ecosystems, they become very, very chain specific, right? So this basically it becomes hard for especially users who are probably interacting with one set of platforms and one set of chains to also start migrating and start interacting with other ecosystems where they probably are getting better benefits, or there are other ecosystems that are probably solving better for the kind of use cases that they're looking to sort of interact with. Say, probably there is one blockchain that is more optimized for making payments and therefore focuses heavily on DeFi and sort of maybe financial institutions that are probably trying to make a breakthrough or trying to start penetrating into Web3 through that particular chain. There might be something else that's looking at promoting gaming or any of these more specific use cases, right? So I would say one of these which is that a lot of platforms which build on specific blockchains like this, they lack interoperability and they become too platform specific. So that becomes another challenge for even end users and also sort of builders when they're building any of these applications. The third one, and I think this is a big one, when it comes to interoperability issues, you have bridging, which is a major factor every single place, right? Your bridges are such a core part of the cross-chain infrastructure because they enable transfer of liquidity from one chain to another. And more often than not, I don't think there's been a perfect solution to bridging yet, right? It's always accompanied by a certain amount of anxiety. You don't know if your transactions are going to go through, and this, especially I would say the majority of users who are probably on the newer side, people who are just starting to dabble into Web3 are probably there at the intermediate level. When you look at the kind of liquidity that they are transferring through, right? When let's say you have somebody who's doing a $10 bridging and somebody who's doing $100 bridging, probably somebody who's doing $1,000 bridging. Now, as and when this amount starts increasing, there's a more and more amount of anxiety that gets created, especially in these areas. So bridges are a huge point of, I would say, vulnerability within the cross-chain infrastructure, and this is a core challenge that a lot of great folks in the space are trying to solve for, and I think we're making some great progress here. But definitely, bridging continues to remain one of those bigger issues that need to be tackled. Now, I think the last one is that I want to probably touch upon is gas fees. Now, different chains, based on how they're optimizing for their users, security, speed, or scalability, they have different gas models. They use different types of tokens, which are probably used for payment of fees on each chain, right? And this is a very, very inconvenient it's very inconvenient for end users to be participating in this kind of a thing, especially when you're probably exploring a very new ecosystem or a very new L1 or L2 that is just launched. You probably are unable to effectively bridge any of your funds from other chains to this particular chain and then maybe convert it effectively enough into the native gas token to be able to do this, right? So gas fees are another big area where cross-chain interactions are very, very challenging. And all of these areas are something that has a very significant impact on end user experience.
Yeah, great answer. And it goes to show once again how account abstraction and chain abstraction are so deeply connected. So you've mentioned some of these issues, and so basically, if you could sum it up, how does chain abstraction aim to solve these cross-chain interaction issues?
So I think chain abstraction, as we've been discussing, right? It is hyper focused on solving for interoperability issues. How is it that we can make cross-chain a lot more simple? So I think a very core aspect, again, I'm just reiterating this so that people understand how important the account abstraction infrastructure is to enabling effective cross-chain outcomes through chain abstraction, which is why I'm just sort of reiterating this. But for example, one of the things that chain abstraction can leverage is smart wallets, which are provided by account abstraction, right? This simplifies things like wallet management. Like in case you have wallets on multiple chains, chain abstraction provides you with sort of a unified wallet experience. So you do not need to, in the future potentially, you wouldn't need to handle native tokens or private keys separately for any chain. They can all happen through, a singular, very unified wallet experience. Second one is probably simplification of the cross-chain transactions altogether. So chain abstraction can sort of take things to the next level in terms of abstracting away the complexity that usually accompanies cross-chain transactions, right? Bridging becomes a lot more easier. Your dApps, in fact, something that account abstraction players, for the past 2 years we've been trying to do is how is it that we can make dApps a lot more interoperable across multiple chains chain abstraction just makes it so much more simpler, so much more easier. And all of this usually comes with a lot more enhanced security. I think one of the core, I would say, focus areas, even at Etherspot, in terms of the kind of chain abstraction solutions that we are building, is going to be how is it that we can make the entire infrastructure as decentralized as possible, as secure as possible, as composable as possible, so that because this is, I think, a very core element of Web3 ethos. And that is what we are trying to promote at Etherspot as well, through the kind of chain abstraction solution we intend to build. So I think that was once more feeds straight into how is it that chain abstraction solves for cross-chain challenges. And I think that's something I'm super excited for.
Definitely. It definitely sounds super exciting. And well, actually, the next question touches on a topic which I think is actually a big part of the conversation around chain abstraction. Intents, right? So we've heard this word numerous times.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
could you explain what they are? How they're captured, and basically their role in the big picture.
Okay, so I'm going to try my best to to sort of explain this in a way that I think I'm hoping most people can understand.
Sure.
So whenever you submit a particular transaction on chain, right? You essentially have an intention with that accompanying that particular transaction, correct? Basically, I want to be staking probably 100 USDC in a particular chain, or probably you don't even want that is probably the action level intent. Probably what you want to be doing is you have probably 100 USDC and you want to be getting, say, at least a 10% APR on your 100 USDC, right? What is it that you need to be doing? This is your intention. So whatever it might be, the first thing that probably a user does in this particular in this kind of a user flow is they submit their intent. So this is what an intent is. Basically, what is a user's desired outcome? So they want to be swapping tokens, they want to be doing a multi swap, they want to be bridging tokens, they want to be maximizing a certain kind of yield in a certain kind of DeFi instrument, whatever that might be. So that's step one. Now, step two is once you have your intent in place, which is a desired kind of outcome, you have another component called a solver. Now, what a solver is basically if there is an intent, the solvers are the mechanism, right? You need somebody to take your intent and execute that or find a way to make that a reality. And that's what solvers do. So usually in the kind of offering that we would be presenting to users, ideally we want probably not just any one or two solvers that are probably going to be able to solve for a particular intent. Therefore, you have solvers that compete with each other, right? Let's say you want to be swapping tokens, or let's say you want to be maximizing a certain amount of yield when you are trying to stake tokens. So different solvers would compete with each other to find which is the best way to do this, right? Now that you have the best path to realizing the intent, which is what solvers would be doing, that particular solver which submits the best kind of way to solve the particular intent gets selected. Therefore, the system that we build comes into play is going to have a methodology in which solvers compete, get selected, and then they execute that particular transaction. So the solver, what it does, it takes the best solver takes the intent, converts that into how is it that this particular intent can be realized, submits that transaction on behalf of the user. This is essentially how intents and solvers work. And I think this should give you an idea also in terms of what is the differences between an intent and a solver and how they work together to enable the end outcome for an end user.
Thank you, Ani. Great job breaking down some of somewhat more technical concepts. And yeah, you exactly. You mentioned solvers, which were going to be one of my questions. So I think you've done a great job breaking these down for the everyday user, or at least for somewhat more experienced users that aren't as familiar with chain abstraction. So, what are the real world benefits of chain abstraction for users and in developers, particularly in terms of simplifying interactions, enhancing scalability, and what we've talked about, onboarding the next billion users into blockchain?
Okay, so that's a good question. That's a very good question. All right. So I think I'm going to approach it slightly differently. Now, when it comes to users, right? Like chain abstraction brings benefits for different kinds of people. It brings you benefits as a user when you're an end user who is probably participating within the ecosystem. It brings you a different set of benefits when it's probably for developers who are probably looking at enhancing scalability, right? It again it brings at an overall industry level. It also sort of brings a certain different kind of benefits. This is mainly for different blockchain ecosystems and different blockchain networks, right? So in terms of onboarding the next billion users, the first thing that I see is it becomes a lot more easy for users to get onboarded because you start removing the need for end users to understand what is a blockchain or how does a blockchain actually work. What are wallets? What is an EOA? What is a smart wallet? You can start to create applications and softwares that actually can abstract this away at a much higher level, including abstracting away gas fees to the point where people don't even need to be concerned about tokens at all or native tokens at all. Next is I mean, at Etherspot, we, for the longest time, whenever we tried to explain what is account abstraction, we have a very simple way in which we would do this. We would basically talk about how, through building account abstraction infrastructure, we are trying to bring Web2 like UX to Web3 dApps, right? Chain abstraction, as I mentioned earlier, is I feel like one of those natural evolutions of how account abstraction infrastructure can be applied, and therefore I think it further enhances this particular description or the kind of vision that we have, and gives it a lot more weight in terms of how much more Web2 like user experience we can create for end users. So just to give you an example would be we can drive adoption by logging in with an email, which is what social logins are there already for, but people still understand that, hey, there is a wallet that's functioning in the backend. So we can create user experiences in the future. And this is something I'm really excited to see how it pans out, where people don't even need to understand that there is a wallet that is working in the backend, right? Third one is sort of, I would say to a certain extent, there is also, seamless cross-chain interactions. So I like to sort of put it this way, which is that chain abstraction is one of those things which, even though there's a trend of blockchain fragmentation, which is what has created L1s and L2s and L3s, chain abstraction infrastructure actually starts the entire ecosystem on a path of refragmentation. Probably not, in its true sense that, oh, there's not going to be L1s, L2s, and L3s anymore. It's just that the end user does not need to know about any of that, right? Third thing that I'm also looking at is I think there's going to be a more secure, a more trustworthy experience, because chain abstraction to a great extent it also mitigates bridge hacks and transaction failures, right? So this goes a very long way in terms of how is it that we can build confidence within the blockchain technology itself. So I think these are some benefits that really come to mind in terms of the way that that I would say for end users or for onboarding the next billion users, as you said, we can use chain abstraction infrastructure, but we can also, do you want to even dig into the kind of benefits that probably the different target audiences, for developers, for users, for different blockchains? Do we want to dig into that as well?
Yeah, so yeah, I think it would be interesting to also mention, what these benefits would be, for example, let's say for developers, since Etherspot works, is one of our target audiences. I think it would be interesting if you could point out some of these benefits for developers.
Okay, sure. All right. So now we've mainly gone over, I think, most of the benefits for end users, right? Like single wallet, no native tokens. The user experience looks fairly consistent regardless of the kind of chain or wallet that people are using. And of course, the biggest one, which is that cross-chain transactions are a lot more composable, and therefore a lot more easier and a lot more, I would say, successful in general. Now, in terms of benefits for also apart from end users, you have developers that benefit greatly from incorporating chain abstraction into their offerings, right? So the first one is, I think every developer's nightmare is it's easy to develop something, when you're part of a bounty program for a particular L1 or an L2. But the moment you start trying to see how is it that this particular DApp can go cross chain, it becomes so much more harder, right? So cross chain DApp development becomes so much more easier, right? We have standardized APIs and SDKs which can be made available to developers through a chain abstraction offering, and we can deploy them across multiple chains. Therefore, it becomes so much more easier for developers to, actually from the get-go, from day zero itself, have a vision for their dApps to be interoperable for the vast majority of the ecosystem. Second is, with chain abstraction, dApps can start tapping into users from multiple blockchains. Now, this is something that has always been possible through DEXs and bridges, but through chain abstraction, as we were earlier discussing, a unified experience means that all of this goes into the backend, right? So you are now enabling cross-chain interactions at the truest level. You're no longer relying on DEXs and bridges anymore, or just DEXs and bridges anymore. And therefore, you're actually able to give these folks who are developing applications access to a much larger user base than they would normally have through their own chain specific or platform specific application. The third one that I look at is, normally people need to, I would say, when it comes to a particular tab, they need to start interacting with bridges, they need to interact with dApps. Now, these usually come in the form of different overheads. You usually have developers who are, I would say, in terms of time and money that people consume to make sure that all of this infrastructure and pieces of these infrastructure are well maintained and well integrated. So I would say this interoperability comes at saving costs as well for developers. They're basically effectively removing a certain set of overheads in terms of development costs. So developers can now focus on building some great features for their dApp rather than making sure that their dApp can actually be an on-chain application and work well across multiple blockchains, right? Now, if this is one part of, if developers from one part of this coin, the other part of it is the blockchain ecosystem itself, right? So one thing that gets enabled through chain abstraction is you have a much higher transaction throughput, and therefore even folks who are building newer blockchains or existing blockchains very efficiently can route their transactions, and therefore also sort of provide overall a greater benefit to the users within the ecosystem itself. So my point is that when you're using a chain abstraction offering and there's a particular dApp, and let's say that it is present on, say, 3 or 4 different chains, what it can do is when it's submitting transactions on chain, it can pick and choose now in terms of, hey, which are the dApps that I want to be interacting with? Sorry, which are the blockchains that I want to be interacting with? Where is it that I want to be submitting my transactions, right? And maybe there is, probably one of the blockchain networks that a particular dApp is on is Ethereum. Ethereum is very expensive. It gets easily congested. So chain abstraction infrastructure also enables dApps to maybe start submitting transactions on chain, not necessarily only on Ethereum, but also on Polygon or maybe some other chain that they want to be present on. So it enables a much higher transaction throughput, lesser chance of transaction drop-offs, etc. Next is I think this is the biggest thing, which is accessibility. So when you are building a particular dApp, you're usually constrained by the ecosystem that you're present on, right? So chain abstraction infrastructure gives developers that option to not just be constrained to a particular ecosystem and work within that ecosystem, but also gives you access to users from multiple different ecosystems and also the option to try and figure out which is the best ecosystem that suits them. So in the end, it's sort of democratizing blockchain access itself, right? So these are, I think, again, in my opinion, a couple of the use cases, very real world use cases for different sets of people when it comes to chain abstraction infrastructure.
Great answer. Thank you, Rani. So one of the other points I think we need to touch on, which then again, I'll request you to try and kind of break this down, although obviously this one needs to be a bit more technical, but I feel like it's a necessary question as well. So what are the key security and privacy challenges in multi-chain interactions, and how does chain abstraction address them? We know that there are, let's put it this way, two main approaches. One resides in resource locks, the other one with escrow contracts. So could you, maybe address some of these challenges and kind of break down these two concepts and explain how how they can work to enhance security in a cross-chain ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think this is going to get fairly technical, but and I wouldn't say that I am the foremost expert here, but I do have an understanding of how is it that a lot of these security and privacy challenges are sort of solved for by chain abstraction infrastructure. So I'm going to try and break it down in a way that I think most folks should be able to understand. But sort of please bear with me in case I do make any mistakes here. So I think we have sort of touched upon a couple of these points earlier. We do have, a bunch of different issues as we discussed in terms of what are the different security issues that usually come into play. One of those was mainly with respect to how bridges are a big point of vulnerability within any infrastructure, or when there's within even any blockchain ecosystem, and also any infrastructure that sort of integrates them. So that's number one. Bridges often act as this sort of centralized or semi-centralized intermediaries, right? And this makes them like usually a lot of hacks and attacks usually happen at the bridge level, or where there are various bridges. The second one is something called replay attacks. So transactions which are broadcast on one chain, they might be maliciously replayed on another chain if the ecosystems or the chains are not adequately isolated. So this is another issue that usually comes with multi-chain dApps as well, and therefore something that happens when it comes to transactions that are also submitted within these particular dApps. Third one is, I feel like this is a little bit of a generic point, but there is no standardization of security protocols as such. At least this is, and every chain has different levels of security protocols that they adhere to. They have their own security models, and therefore, when it comes to cross-chain interoperability, there is obviously going to be a mismatch in terms of the kind of security standards that each chain hold themselves to. So when it comes to a very secure chain interacting with a slightly less secure chain, there are vulnerabilities that sort of open up. Now, the next challenge, I think, would be trust, especially in terms of intermediaries. So currently, many cross-chain solutions rely on a bunch of different intermediaries and third parties, oracles, relayers, and more to usually verify and relay your data. Right now, even though the ethos of Web3 is, complete trustlessness, we're yet to get there. So this, to a certain extent, I think introduces a certain level of trust assumption on behalf of the user or on behalf of, I would say, most builders as well. So the kind of impact this usually causes, obviously, would be that in case any of these intermediaries get compromised, then be it data, be it liquidity, be it anything else, all of these start getting affected, especially when it comes to cross-chain transactions, right? So this becomes another issue. The last one, I feel like one more is probably finality. And I think this is definitely a very big issue, which is different blockchains have different varying finality times, right? Transactions can be confirmed on one chain a lot faster, and it might not yet be final on another. So this usually happens when it comes to transfer of liquidity, right? And big issue where one chain it gets confirmed, the other it doesn't, and now nobody understands, what is this discrepancy. I mean, all of us have been at that place where, you're trying to bridge funds over or send funds over to another chain. You don't know if the transaction has gone through, hasn't gone through. You're constantly checking your Etherscan or your blockchain explorer to understand where this is happening. So I think these are some of some sort of major I would say issues that sort of keep coming up again and again, especially when it comes to cross-chain transactions. Now, especially in the kind of work that Etherspot does, I do want to sort of say this with a certain amount of pride. Is we do. I'm so sorry. Is there a little bit of noise from around me, Alex?
Yes, a little bit, but we can still hear.
Just a sec. There's a little bit of noise. I'm just going to go on mute for 10 seconds and then be back.
Sure, no problem. So yeah, guys, make sure to stick with us. We have around let's say 15 minutes to go, couple 2 or 3 more questions. By the way, I would like to take this time to remind you guys, if you have any comments, make sure to add them to the comment section so we can address them later. Nani, Ani, I get the impression that you're back. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, so
I'm back.
So yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So I think I was going over the different security and privacy challenges, right? So I think the second part of your question in terms of, how is it that, resource locks and escrow contracts usually play into security? I'm going to try and sort of answer that. Now, here, with respect to, whenever you're building a particular infrastructure, when you have so many different security and privacy challenges, you need to, make certain choices and certain trade-offs when it comes to solving this particular thing. Now, one thing I sort of can say with great pride, especially in terms of the kind of work that we are doing at Etherspot, is we have always kept users' control and visibility at the core focus of what we are building. We try to keep things as decentralized as possible, as censorship resistant as possible, especially, I'm just going to go off on a quick tangent here just to illustrate this point, which is about how Etherspot has been working with the Ethereum Foundation to develop the shared mempool. The shared mempool is basically just a very classic example of how we are making the account abstraction infrastructure, especially the bundler infrastructure, a lot more robust and a lot more censorship resistant. How is it that the shared mempool works is, let's say that one bundler one day decides to stop accepting a user ops due to whatever reason. Let's say the country, they have, the particular company in a particular country has received orders that, hey, shut down all on-chain transactions. So since the company doesn't want to go out of business, they're going to comply. So what happens to user ops that are being submitted through that particular bundler? They need to find another place. They need to find another way in which they can continue to be submitted on chain. So when there's censorship at play, censorship resistance, which is one of the, again, a very core element of the Web3 ethos, comes into play. And this is the kind of work that we're doing as well. A shared mempool propagates your user up to another bundler in the shared mempool and make sure that your transaction still goes through. So with the reason I went off on this tangent was mainly to highlight how committed we are to building infrastructure that is safe, secure, transparent, and as decentralized as possible. So with this understanding, I think I want to approach, Etherspot and its choice for choosing resource locks over escrow mechanisms in terms of as sort of our way in which we want to enhance security. So maybe a quick overview in terms of how these work, right? So now a resource lock and an escrow contract are both, ways in which people can secure their funds or assets during cross-chain operations. Okay, so both of them are doing essentially the same thing, but the way in which they go about doing this is where they vary, right? So resource lock, what it does is it locks assets on a source chain while issuing a corresponding representation, let's say some sort of a wrap token, onto the target chain. So one of the biggest advantages here is that there are no intermediaries which are involved in this particular transaction. So assets remain on the original chain, and therefore it enhances security by reducing the attack surface. Unlike when, let's say, you are bridging something over from chain A to chain B, where you can exploit the bridging transaction itself. And that's where, I think over the past 1.5 years, a lot of different hacks have happened there as well. Second is a resource lock. It relies on the source chain's native security itself. So usually, especially when infrastructure providers work with highly reliable chains, the native security of usually blockchains is already very high. They usually hold themselves to fairly high standards. So the native security of the blockchain itself can be leveraged to protect those logged assets. So that's another one. The last one, I think, is something called atomicity. So usually when it comes to atomic swaps, what happens is that when we leverage resource locks, we can make sure that on both sides of a transaction, we can complete them at roughly the same time. Now, while there are a set of advantages here, there are issues as well, right? It is like you do need to have a certain level of ecosystem and chain support. You're now limited to chains that can support native locking mechanisms, right? So this is a little bit of a drawback when it comes to resource locks, but I still believe that this is so much more better than escrow contracts. Like, for example, an escrow contract is very simple. It is basically a smart contract that holds funds or assets inside of itself, and then it lets go of these particular assets so long as certain conditions are fulfilled, right? So they are highly programmable. They have a certain level of transparency, but it brings in, again, one of those earlier a very big security concern, which is that you usually have these smart contracts usually work with some sort of oracle or some sort of relayer to verify these conditions. And when an intermediary becomes compromised, then that's a huge security vulnerability that you have no control over as somebody who's building an on-chain application or on-chain infrastructure, right? The second part is, again, when you're implementing escrows, if they're poorly implemented, it is highly possible that you have a very singular point of failure as well. So one thing goes, the whole thing goes, right? So I mean, there are examples, I think, in terms of on-chain transactions that have happened where people have locked funds within a smart contract and now they're no longer able to have access to that particular smart contract or that particular escrow, or something has gone wrong and people are no longer able to access the funds which have been there, and therefore things go wrong, right? So this is a single point of failure. There's nothing you can do about it. So in that sense, I think the fact that when we are going about approaching solving the chain abstraction problem, we are choosing resource locks over escrows. I think this is how we inform our decision. Again, it's mainly to be more decentralized and to give the best possible experience to the end user while addressing the highest number of security concerns that could possibly arise.
Sure. Great answer. Thank you for for kind of introducing the work Etherspot has been doing. So that kind of would be my next question, which is how exactly is Etherspot applying chain abstraction to improve both users and developers experience. So as you kind of introduced this question already, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, how does Etherspot address key issues like MEV protection and censorship resistance? So yeah, if you can give like a bit of an introduction of what Etherspot is doing, and then move on and answer this question, that would be great.
Sure. I know that we're running up on time, so I'll try to keep it concise. I think the short answer to this question is like MEV protection. And again, why is it that these are important? That is because these are core security issues for users, right? And since day one, as I told you earlier, we are heavily focused on being able to solve for as many security concerns as possible that usually come out of these kind of cross-chain when you're venturing into the cross-chain transaction space. Therefore, what we've done, in fact, is we are building out a chain abstraction offering in which you have MEV protection and censorship resistance, which are inbuilt. So I know that earlier I'd gone off on a slight tangent in terms of introducing the shared mempool and the kind of work we've been doing there. That ties in directly to the kind of work we are doing to promote censorship resistance. I'm not going to repeat myself, but essentially make sure that your transactions, regardless of who's trying to stop them, so long as there are bundlers who are part of a shared mempool, your user op will always go through. And if whether that is Etherspot's bundler or it is somebody else's self-hosted bundler or somebody else, it doesn't matter, because in the end, all of us are working on the same thing, which is how is it that the end user can have a great experience with on-chain transactions. Now, taking this a step further is that when it comes to Alex, am I still audible?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. So taking this a step further is when both of these are usually made available right out of the box with the kind of offering that we are building for developers to leverage chain abstraction, it becomes super useful and super easy for developers to start focusing more on figuring out how is it that they can provide a great user experience, how is it that they can develop more innovative use cases for the infrastructure, as opposed to them trying to figure out, okay, which other third party entities that we might have to run behind or tie up with to provide a certain decent level of security for their end user.
Okay, great answer. So yeah, to kind of wrap it up, if you could, some the answer to this question in, like, let's say 2 or 3 sentences, like looking ahead, how do you see chain abstraction shaping the broader blockchain space?
Alex, I could actually go on for another 10
Of
minutes in
course.
terms of how chain abstraction
Obviously.
has a future. I think the past 1 week that we spent at DevCon, talking to developers, is really it's sort of been such a such a hopeful experience, to be very honest. I think I can answer this question, but I know that we are out of time, so I'm just going to keep it very, very concise. The way that I look at chain abstraction is, number one, your end user experience becomes so much more seamless. Number two, we are finally starting to touch upon, what I would say what the internet and therefore Web 2 started when it started to really take off in terms of adoption, right? Where people were no longer people no longer needed to understand what's a dial-up connection, what is packages, what is the speed of the internet, all of these things. People could directly interact with applications, interact with users over the internet. While the rest of the cloud services, the rest of the hosting services, all of these things, servers, how our communication done, all of this was abstracted away, right? I think we're starting to, with chain abstraction, I see the Web3 space headed in that direction. With this, I think what I'll see in the next 1 to 2 years, and this is, I know that I'm giving a very short term vision, but in just the next 1 to 2 years, I see a huge, massive explosion of consumer centric applications being built on all of the blockchains. Because the biggest issue with respect to wallets, with respect to user experience, with respect to security, with respect to interoperability, all of these are quickly getting resolved through chain abstraction. And the innovation just doesn't stop here, right? Chain abstraction is another step. What comes next, I don't know, but it's going to be so much more better. And I think I'm extremely hopeful. And I know for a fact that there are so many great builders out there who are just waiting to see how is it that chain abstraction can be leveraged to sort of give a better experience to their users, and thereby see how all of us together can work to promote the entire ecosystem altogether.
Thank you so much, Shani. What a great answer. Very insightful and definitely an exciting vision for the blockchain. I think I speak for everyone when I say that. I hope you're right. And so yeah, guys. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. We've covered a lot of ground, from the basics of chain abstraction to its practical applications, its role in shaping the future of blockchain, and the work we're doing in the space. As I mentioned before, this is just the beginning of a series of space we'll be hosting on chain abstraction. Over the coming weeks and months, we'll dive deeper into specific topics, share more insights on what we're doing, and invite people from other teams in the ecosystem to join our conversations. So make sure you follow Etherspot and stay tuned for announcements about our next sessions. And very quickly, before we wrap up, I want to mention that we started a developer survey at the Account Abstraction Community Hub at DevCon. And, to better understand the challenges developers encounter when implementing account abstraction, now we're inviting the broader Web3 community, you, to contribute to this effort. So participants will receive a detailed report of the findings and a 1-month free subscription to Etherspot's developer plan as a token of appreciation. The survey is brief. It just takes about 5 minutes of your time, and we'll be accepting responses until the 5th of December. And your input will play an important role in shaping the future of account abstraction. So yeah, make sure to check it out. We've added the URL to the comment section. And so yeah, thank you again for being part of this journey. We're excited to continue exploring how chain abstraction, account abstraction, and other innovations can bring us closer to a seamless, user-friendly Web3. See you at the next space.
Thanks again for having me, Alex. Have a good day. Thanks, everyone.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.